Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the traditional fourth regional Sorainen ESG webinar in the series of the webinars dedicated to various ESG-related topics. According to the European Commission, buildings in the EU are responsible for almost 40% of greenhouse gas emissions and 40% of our energy consumption. No surprise that legislative initiatives and proposals related to greening the construction sector is an important part of the EU Green Deal and the Fit for 55 package. Thus, our webinar today is dedicated to greening the construction sector, and we will have two speakers from Sorainen, my dear colleagues from Estonian office, Elina Mizerova, and from Lithuanian office, Simonas Šlitas. We also have two guest speakers today, Nora Maria Laurinaitytė from the Green Finance Institute in Lithuania, and Andis Kublačiovs, who is Project Development and Sustainability Director at Linstow Baltic, Latvia. The webinar will last 1.5 hours. We will have around 1 hour for the presentations and the Q&A session at the beginning of the event. You are more than welcome to post your questions in the Q&A section that you can see on the top of your screens, and we will do our best to address your questions during the Q&A session. And now I would like to give a word to Elina Mizerova and Simonas Šlitas. Before doing that, only a short reminder that the event is recorded and the recording will be available on the Sorainen website. Simonas, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vitalija, and hello, everyone. As introduced by Vitalija, today me and Elina would like to talk about green construction legislation and also the opportunities and challenges arising from it. But I think before going into specifics, it is really important to understand what is green construction. So it can be mentioned that there is no legal definition of green construction in the EU law. Various principles and objectives related to sustainable construction are often reflected in directives, regulations, and also policies aimed at advancing sustainable development. So as European legal base related to green construction is really broad, today me and Elina would like to provide a brief overview of two new legal acts. And I will be starting my presentation with an overview of Energy Performance of Buildings Directive and actually a recast of it. So this recast was adopted on 12th April 2024. It is yet to come into force. However, it is important to know that it will have to be transposed to the national legal systems within 24 months of its entry into force. And again, before talking about the specific legal requirements provided in the directive, I think it is important to present why European Union is trying to reach its sustainability goals through buildings regulation. So first of all, as mentioned by Vitalija, buildings account for approximately 40% of the EU's energy consumption. They also contribute to more than half of EU's gas consumption, and about 35% of energy-related greenhouse gas emissions come from buildings. And there are actually a lot of existing challenges while trying to tackle these sustainability matters, as approximately 35% of the EU's buildings are over 50 years old, nearly 75% of the building stock is energy inefficient, and the average annual energy renovation rate is only about 1%. The directive itself tries to tackle those existing challenges through two main ways. One is the renovation of currently existing buildings, and two is stricter requirements for new buildings. So I would like to start from key requirements provided in the directive with regard to renovation of non-residential and residential buildings. So talking about non-residential buildings, it can be mentioned that the directive provides for two important thresholds, 16% threshold and 26% threshold. So each member state must set a maximum energy performance threshold such that 16% of its national non-residential building stock is above that threshold. And the key requirement here is that by 2030, all non-residential buildings must be below this threshold. The same rule is actually applied with regard to 26% threshold. However, the requirement here is that by 2033, all non-residential buildings must be below this threshold. So what this means in practice? Essentially, member states are required to, by 2030, renovate the 16% of worst performing non-residential buildings, and by 2033, renovate the 26% of worst performing non-residential buildings. So this is the key requirement with regard to renovation of non-residential buildings. Moving to residential buildings, member states must ensure that the average primary energy use for the entire residential building stock by 2030 decreases by at least 16% compared to 2020 by 2030, and by 2035 decreases by at least 20 to 22% compared to 2020 by 2035. So it is also a huge requirement for member states, and European Union is actually expecting that these requirements will cause a renovation wave. Another important thing to note is that member states may decide not to apply these requirements to certain buildings. For example, buildings officially protected as part of designated environment, or because of their special architectural value, historical merit, can be exempted from application of these requirements. Similar exemption can be applied to buildings used as places of worship and religious activities. The directive itself provides a list of buildings that can be exempted from these requirements. However, it will be decided by the member states while transposing these requirements to the national law, how they will be applied and what exemptions will be available in the national legal regulation. And these was the key points of the directive related to renovation of residential and non-residential buildings. And another key area addressed by the directive is requirements for new buildings. So the key requirement for new buildings provided in the directive is that from 1st of January 2028, new buildings owned by public bodies must be zero emission buildings. And from 1st January 2030, all new buildings must be zero emission. What is zero emission building? It is a building with very high energy performance, a building which requires zero or very low energy consumption, which produces zero on-site carbon emissions from fossil fuels, and also generates zero or very low operational greenhouse gas emissions. We can see that some of the thresholds provided in the definition of zero emission building are not clear at the moment. For example, it is not clear what is a very low operational greenhouse gas emissions. So it can be mentioned that the member states will have to establish those thresholds by evaluating their building stock, by evaluating the average consumption, and those specific thresholds will be established by each member state based on the available data and calculations made in accordance with the principles provided in the directive. So this is the key requirement for new buildings provided in the recast of the directive. And actually, these are the key new things, new legal rules that I wanted to discuss with you today. And as a lot of will actually depend on transposition of these requirements to the national legal systems, I think we can already start thinking about what business opportunities they can create, what public benefits then they can create, and if there will be any possible downsides of the new legal regulation. So from the business perspective, I think that this recast of energy performance of buildings directive can, of course, create new opportunities for business in the construction industry. For example, the expected renovation wave should create more work for contractors in the local markets. Of course, demand for energy efficient materials, technologies, and design expertise will increase. And also companies specializing in sustainable building solutions can thrive. So those companies and those businesses that are already focusing on development of energy efficient materials, energy efficient technologies will have an opportunity to take the market by storm. From the public perspective, of course, the benefits are quite clear. Healthier environment, enhanced public health and well-being, and of course, savings for occupants and taxpayers. Of course, we can also start to think about any negative sides of the new legal rules. And the first one that comes to mind is increase in construction prices. It is possible that more advanced energy efficient materials and more advanced technologies will cost much more than the ones that are used today. Therefore, the increase in construction prices is likely. Supply chain constraints is also a thing to think about, because if the market will not be ready to supply a required amount of energy efficient materials and energy efficient technologies, then we can see a shortage of goods in the market, and then that can also lead to the increase in construction prices. And something that is really connected to increasing construction prices is affordability and influence on the already problematic housing situation. So in the past years, we see that price of housing increased drastically, and further stricter requirements related to sustainability of buildings can also have a negative influence on this aspect. So we will see how the directive and requirements set in it will affect the communities, the economy. And actually, that's it from my side. That's a quick overview and quick intro from me. Thank you very much for your attention. And now I give the floor to my colleague, Elina.
Yes, hi from my side as well. Just sharing the slides. So I will be covering the new regulation on construction products today. And where we're talking about this CPR, then we relate to it as an update, but actually it goes beyond the mere updates and holding a considerable transformative potential for the sector. So I like to call it a new regulation, not an update as such. But to set the scene for the discussion, the first would be to address what CPR are. And as in EU, we love free movement. Here we're talking about the free movement of construction products. So if you buy something from the member states, some construction products, building blocks or something like this, then you can be sure that you can use it, and it is the same standard of quality that is applicable in your member states. So it's all about the safety of construction works and the standard to which all the products must relate. The standards are harmonized technical specifications or standards and some implementing and delegated acts from the Commission. And the CPR as such sets an obligation for manufacturers, importers, and distributors. So this is like a short intro of what we're talking about today, and this is revised. This regulation has been with us since 2013, so quite some time. And in 2016, the Commission took up the research and started to ask whether the CPR is working or not, and getting feedback from different groups and member states. And that was the result that we have seen in 2022. The new proposal has been published for the CPR to review the initial act. And last month, actually, the Parliament adopted the proposal in first reading. So now we are awaiting the regulation to the Council's position in first reading, meaning that still some amendments and feedback are possible. So the regulation we're talking about today is not in force yet. But why the new CPR? As my colleagues mentioned, Vitalija and Simonas already, and you can see at the screen, the construction products is 30% of EU's annual waste generation, 40% of EU energy consumption, etc., etc. So in 2016, when the Commission took up the research, they have identified certain shortcomings in the implementation of the CPR and a number of challenges. Those has not been related to the environment as such. There has been a lot of constraints, starting from the standardization process not working and ending with the surveillance problems. But after 2016, we have seen the European Green Deal communication, we have seen the Circular Economy Action Plan and the Renovation Wave. So all those highlighted the role of the CPR as a part of efforts towards this desirable energy and resource efficient buildings and renovation, and in addressing the overall sustainability of construction products. So now we see CPR as a pillar, as the important pillar of the sustainability as such in the sector. As of now, CPR significantly limits the possibilities to declare in a consistent and in a harmonized way the performance of the products, and to differentiate the products with regard to climate and environment and all other sustainability performances. And it also actually, in practice, significantly limits the possibilities for the member states to define national requirements for buildings, or to include criteria in public procurement at the national level on sustainability objective without putting at risk the functioning of this single market. So to encourage the use of this greener construction products, and to have more clear information on how construction products impact the environment and what are their sustainable performance, the new CPR has been drafted. And of course, it backs the energy performance of buildings directive that Simonas introduced you to, because when you are renovating or building new houses and you need them to be net zero, you need to understand what are the impacts of the products that you are building it from. So this helps calculate the building's energy efficiency, etc. It is also important to highlight that the construction products regulation is a part of a bigger initiative, which is a circular economy package that the Commission prepared. So you see here in the center, the eco-design for sustainable products regulation. And then we have the CPR here, just one part of it. We have the circular strategy for the textiles and consumer rights, etc., etc. But everything goes around this eco-design for sustainable products regulation, and the construction products regulation of CPR is not an exclusion. So this is important. So updated CPR in a nutshell. As we're talking about greening the construction sector, we will talk mainly about the environmental sustainability topics that the CPR update relates to. There indeed has been a lot on the standardization and on the new harmonized standards on how they will be prepared and the system will be changed, but we won't be touching upon it today. So when talking about the environmental sustainability and what updates that CPR provides for, then we see this shift in the mindset that if we previously had the free movement of construction products, now we have the free movement of safe and sustainable construction products. So that is important and highlighted. For manufacturers, it will lead to the fact that they will need to take responsibility for the environmental impact of their construction product in the same way as until now it was the manufacturer was accountable for example for fire reaction of its product or acoustic insulation, etc. So this will of course again enable the evaluation of the building's environmental performance as mandated by the EPBD introduced earlier. So manufacturers will have to deliver environmental information about the life cycle of their products, and data always means liability, and data also always means of course data management, so it's something to have a mental note for. We will also have digitalization of the construction sector of some kinds. So the digital product passport will include the declaration of performance and conformity with the information on the environmental impact as well. And we will have a broader scope, so incentivizing the reuse of products, used and remanufactured products are also included now, as this is a part of the bigger initiative on the circular economy. Also, the range of regulated economic operators is extended, and there are some articles on the green public procurement and construction products. So obligations of economic operators as such. Declaration of performance that we have talked about before now will become a declaration of performance and conformity, and it should include the environmental sustainability performance information over the life cycle of the construction product. For the declaration, of course, you need to have a basis, meaning the technical documentation, meaning that you have to assess your product and receive all those calculations of environmental essential characteristics. And those characteristics that you need to assess your product against are stipulated in the Annex 2 of the directive. So overall, there is a responsibility to consider and address the sustainability aspects. And of course, it means starting from the design to production and then to marketing. Because, for example, the packaging of the construction product will also need to undergo the assessment and taken into account when presenting the environmental information. Yeah, so we will see how it will go. And how many challenges we will see, because the declaration of performance and conformity and gathering all this information mean that we need a new harmonized standards, and we will wait for them. But the final goal, of course, is an accurate assessment at the construction works level and helping the directive that Dimas introduced before. So to sum up, business opportunities, of course, there are plenty, innovation and competition, including reuse of the construction materials, and greener and more digital industry is more attractive for investment as it has less risks. It also has public benefits, starting from the circular point and background of this new regulation, but there are better protection of the consumers as well, because, for example, the Commission has the right, according to the new regulation, to provide guidance on how to label particular construction products that are used a lot by consumers. So we may also see some labeling requirements coming later. And there is a promotion of circular economy in the sector as such. But as always, there are downsides, and we have already seen from the research done on the CPR currently in force that the harmonized standards are not working and maybe are a bit outdated. So we will certainly see how it will go this time, as there are a lot of innovation in the process, and the safety net also included in the regulation. But of course, the costs are also the possible downside, because it's increased the workload for the architects, and it requires new competences on the market as well. And the construction prices and cost of drafting of the project may also increase, of course, due to this. But nevertheless, let's hope that there are more business opportunities than possible downsides, and wait for the regulation to be finally adopted.
Thank you very much, Simonas and Elina, for your very good presentation. We all understand, and hope that a huge renovation wave and a new sustainable construction wave is coming. For me, it is especially interesting to hear and to understand how much the regulation in various fields intersect with each other. For example, the requirement that all buildings by public bodies are zero emission by 2028. It of course correlates nicely with green public procurement requirements of our states. Of course, this also will impact, the project finance requirements. Many ask whether, the new requirements will mean any, obstacles or hurdles in securing financing for those projects. And of course, the all new measures should come hand in hand with the policy measures to ensure affordability of this sustainable housing. With that in mind, I'm very happy to introduce our guest speaker, Nora Marija Laurinaitytė. Nora is green finance expert at the Green Finance Institute, which is part of INVEGA, Lithuanian National Promotional Agency. And I understand that Green Finance Institute has a very nice and very ambitious goal to be, center of excellence and of knowledge on sustainability and sustainable finance. So Nora, we are very eager to hear your thoughts on greening the construction sector and perhaps on some initiatives of the Green Finance Institute.
So thank you so much for having us. I'll try to catch up. We're a little bit behind schedule, I see, so I'll try to be quick because when I start thinking about climate change and construction sector, I like to think from first question of why should we care? We should care, everybody, every single one of us, if we're involved in construction sector or not, we should care about climate change, because what we are experiencing right now is the warmest years ever recorded, and the years are getting hotter and hotter. And I think everybody in the Baltic states noticed when it was a super warm Easter period this year, and completely unexpected and unknown. This has been noticed quite some time ago by the policymakers, and people started raising questions of why is this happening? The culprit, one obvious culprit that was found was the carbon emissions. So what has been noticed that at the same time as the temperatures, global temperature levels are rising, the carbon emissions globally are rising. And they are rising, they are still rising, and they're rising at huge rates. And when we start looking at where these emissions are coming from, construction and buildings are they form quite a big share of emissions. So as has been mentioned before by Simonas, the global carbon emissions from building operation and construction is about 40% of total. Similarly, about 40% of global energy usage comes from energy that's required to construct buildings and operate them. And when we start thinking about reducing this carbon footprint, we have to think about the life cycle of a building. And we heard that topic before, the concept before, again, when we heard about the regulation. So what is this life cycle of building? So it starts from the idea stage. So when we start thinking of how we should design the building, and then when we actually design the building, we have to think about every single step. So raw materials, where are they coming from? How are they made? How are they going to be brought into the building site? How is the building itself will be constructed? So that's the before the building is even there stage. Then when the building is done, we need to think about operational carbon. And this is where this net zero concept, net zero buildings concept talks about, like what does it mean to be in nearly net zero operationally. So whenever we have a building, the building has to be heated, the building has to be cooled, the building has to be lit up, so electricity. All this energy has to come from somewhere, and if that energy comes from non-clean sources during the life of a building, which is normal building, what, 80, 100 years, you can imagine easily being there if it's a good, long-lasting building. That building every year will need energy to light up. And every year, if that energy is not clean, this process will emit carbon. After that, we need to think, obviously, building during its life needs some refurbishment, some repairs, some maintenance, some some parts maybe need to be replaced. Again, in every single step of this, some carbon may be emitted. And at the end of life, we also have to think about it. That's again, all of this we have to think before we even start the building. In the design stage, how are we going to deconstruct the building? How are we going to take the waste from that building into the waste processing plants, transports to the waste plants? Can we reuse some of this? And how are we going to dispose it? Is it going to be burned? Is it going to be just sitting there for centuries to decompose? The thinking, so when policymakers started thinking about it and they understood the importance of this carbon footprint, it wasn't that long ago. So about 10 years ago, in 2015, the unprecedented event happened. So the Paris Agreement has been reached, where the governments from around the world agreed that something has to be done about climate change, and they committed to trying to reduce the heating. So if you recall the first chart, this temperature rise to below 2% above pre-industrial levels. Let me tell you, we're not doing quite great on that. Because for quite some time after this 2015, we didn't really understand what are we talking about. Because talking about some temperatures, it's not real, it's not tangible, it's not easy to understand why, for example, someone designing a building should care about where the raw materials are coming from. So comes 2021, 6 years later, European Union understood that they have to somehow make it more tangible, this percent temperature degree increase. And they committed in European climate law to reaching climate neutrality by 2050. It is a legal obligation, and there's also some interim targets, and 2030 is the first point where we will be put to fact to see if we actually manage to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And here now, see, we are not talking anymore about some temperature increases. We're now talking about greenhouse gas emissions because of this link that I showed you in the first and second graphs. And very clearly, when we start talking about cutting emissions, what are these cut emissions? So what we need to start doing is we need to start avoiding emissions. This idea of avoiding emissions has been around as long as this idea of counting greenhouse gases came about, that if we continue doing things the way we used to do, that we're not reducing our carbon footprint, and we're not doing what we need to do to keep the world from heating up above this 2 degrees from pre-industrial levels. So we need to do something different, some new goods, some new services to save this emissions. And construction sector, given that it accounts for 40% of global carbon emissions, construction and building operation, is one of the big parts where if we start avoiding emissions, that we can make a big dent in our overall global emissions and in our fight with climate change. So the general approach that's advised when we start thinking about building is presented with this upside down triangle. So first we should start thinking, do we need to build the building in the first place, or can we repurpose and refurbish buildings? And that's where all of this renovation wave is coming in. Let's improve the buildings we have rather than build new ones, or knock down the old ones and build new ones. Build less. Let's build buildings that are easy to use to adapt to different uses over the life cycle of the buildings. Let's build cleverly. So let's look at the materials and use materials that are low carbon materials, or that we are easy to deconstruct and reuse. Let's build efficiently and let's minimize waste. And this is why we need to think about that, because in the previous version, so not the recast that Simonas was presenting before, but in the previous version, the commitment was already made to have a nearly carbon-free EU building stock by 2050. Now with this recast, the commitment to reducing the carbon of our buildings is even stronger. So the 2050 is a long way away, but 2030 and having all new buildings basically net zero carbon is coming very fast and is really near on us. And of course, all of this comes with funds. So even though the directive is talking about new buildings, we know that the wave of renovation is coming for the old buildings because of this build less idea, or do we really need to build a building instead of renovating it? And European Union is putting the money where the wars are, and Invega is one of the institutions, so it's the only institution in Lithuania that's in charge of managing the EU funds that are for renovation purposes. So we are the managing institution. We are not not for all renovation programs. We are the designing institution. Sometimes it's Ministry of Environment, sometimes it's Ministry of Economics and Innovation, but quite a lot of funds actually go through Invega as to be distributed to different renovation projects. And as you can see, the amounts are quite large. So if we're talking about apartment buildings, currently we have about 200 million euros new funds coming into that, in addition to the funds that have already arrived, because the renovation has been ongoing for the last 5 years here. And we aim in Invega to multiply these funds using private funds, so that we would have almost a billion euros for the apartment building renovation. That's multi-apartment buildings. We also have dedicated funds for renewable energy in business and public sector. So why are we spending money on renewable energy? It's exactly to tackle this operational carbon question. So we have buildings in place. They need to be lit, they need to be heated. If they are heated or lit from renewable energy, in a sense, they have no carbon footprint because that energy is produced cleanly. Also, we have funds coming for modernization of public buildings, for central heating networks to make it more efficient. So if you see the total amounts, it's a huge share. You can even see that from business side, the current 1 billion euro funds from RRF funds, from Reconstruction Resilience Fund. Part of that is going to also go to businesses for energy efficiency, for decarbonization. Not all of it. Some is for digitalization, for some circular economy ideas, but a lot of it is about making buildings, be it private housing, be it public buildings, be it business buildings, more environmental friendly, less energy demanding, and if for the remaining energy needs, the energy to be produced from renewable sources. So here we are, the Green Finance Institute. We are the Center of Knowledge and Competence in green finance. We are part of INVEGA, so this national agency that's distributing public funds, and we are established by the Ministry of Finance. So we are in the prime position to channel funds, or even though we as independent part of INVEGA are not making funding decisions, but we are forming policies and we are forming advice on how projects should be evaluated to ensure that the funds are flowing where it's most needed in terms of renovations, reconstructions, energy efficiency, and refurbishments. So where are we? We are right in the center of the circle where we try to link investors, supervisors, society, academia, credit institutions, auditors, public sector, and so on, so we can actually make progress. And what are we doing? So we actually have two objectives. As I mentioned before, we are the competence center. So if you have any questions, practical questions, you need expert advice, technical advice on requirements. So for example, you are applying for funding to improve your energy efficiency of your building, and you don't understand how, why there is some requirements, for example, to perform do no significant harm assessment of your renovation process. We are here to help. We are also here to increase knowledge about the green finance and possible sources. So also if you have this great idea of new technology, new construction technology that you want to try out that will make net zero building, that will make a building project with the reused technology or reused materials, you see that you struggle to understand the legal base. We're not lawyers, but we can actually help you, direct you to the right people to ask those questions. On top of that, we are also developing the green finance ecosystem. So we are trying to build all these, to bring all these stakeholders that I showed you in the previous slide together to encourage green technology, to encourage new innovative ideas, and to encourage public-private cooperation. Because as I mentioned before, even for renovation, we are, even though the funds for renovation are huge, we want to multiply it 4 times by using private funds. And so what do? We provide consultations, we provide technical support, we provide education, so we provide also the methodologies and guidelines. So what we hear a lot is that when some people are only just starting on their greening journey, especially in construction sector, and they say, oh, you know, my supplier does not understand why I suddenly started asking him of carbon passes, in a sense, for my raw materials. We are happy to come and explain why it is important, why is it needed, not from a legal side, not from the liability side, but from the general overview side of why we all need to commit to this common goal. So please feel free to get in touch. We are here to make a greener future. And for all the Lithuanian attendees, please join our sustainable finance network that we are starting up. It will be working in different working groups, trying to solve the biggest issues we have in Lithuania, from needs of financing to common standards, to a lot of things that were mentioned by Elina and Simonas beforehand, labeling, requirements, the transposition of directives, and so on. So thank you so much. I'm only a few minutes behind, Vitalija, sorry. I hope that's doesn't put us too much behind schedule.
Thank you so much, Nora. And I believe nobody even noticed that we are a little bit behind the schedule, because it is so interesting. It was very good to hear, you know, I would say this theoretical background, what is behind the certain new legislation. When you understand the background, I believe it is easier, for example, for business owner, for business manager to explain to the business owner, why do we need to do something? What's the rationale and what's the opportunity? And I'm very happy that we have a business representative here today. As mentioned in the beginning, Andis Kublačovs is Project Development and Sustainability Director at Linstow Baltic. And Linstow, well, actually is an active owner of shopping centers, of hotels and whatever. I believe that Andis will tell us more about their sustainability agenda. Andis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vitalija, for the very nice introduction. Yes, good morning, everyone. And yes, let me share some walk the talk things, what we as one of the leading Baltic countries, real estate developers have been doing in terms of sustainability. And actually, we have been trying to do the things way before these Paris agreements and later commitments, which happened in the second decade of this century, but we started a little bit earlier. And yeah, I'll just show some examples what and why we are doing, what are the challenges, and in the end also what is the price tag for some of the things. Not everything is clear, but there are some things to show. So first of all, Linstow Baltic. Yes, here in the Baltic countries, we know it's a real estate developer. We're developing hotels, shopping centers, offices, a little bit in the parking segment as well. But actually, that's a family-owned company from Norway, where real estate is just one of the segments. But this family-owned company, Wilhelmsen Group, they also have the sustainability section, and it has this philosophy to create value for society and its employees, as well as pursuing its commercial goals. Commercial goals are always also important when we talk about this greening. We can't go just absolute green because someone needs to finance it. So we try to balance it out. And I'll say also the accents, what we are working on. And for this Willstar initiative, there are 3 focus areas: education, women empowerment, and marine conservation. Why those? There are several explanations. I will not go into the details, but it's because the group is having a lot of business regarding the cruise ships and the offshore business as well. So that is why offshore, I mean literally in the sea, like wind turbines and something like transporting goods with the ships. But when we go closer to the Linstow is the branch for the real estate development, and with the vision that building for better lives. Yes, we know this slogan that the best building and most sustainable building is the one which is not built. But then we should step out of the business, since this is all about developing and building for someone who needs those buildings, whether it is residents or businesses or any other users. So therefore, we try to do everything to minimize the impact to the world and environment. So the 4 key pillars. Before the ESG sort of became so important was the greenhouse gas emissions topic. Those we are counting already for many, many years. The BREEAM aspect. So I'll say a few more words about this mostly known or worldwide known buildings environment certification. Why BREEAM? Very simple explanation, just because in our home country, in Norway, there is an adopted BREEAM version called BREEAM Nor. And since that was the most widely used, our owners told, sorry guys, you also do that in the Baltics. No other explanation. We know that there are similar schemes like LEED and DGNB and Fitwel and so on, but we are concentrating to the BREEAM. And then in Norway, they also are having the so-called roadmap year 2050 for the real estate sector. And based on that, we are doing our initiatives. As for sustainability standards, we were setting those back in 2006, and currently we are reworking those. That were in energy, or still is, energy directive and environmental directive within the company for the business we do. And the practical results are very visible. So from 2010 to 2018, Linstow reduced carbon emissions by about 43% in the portfolio. And until 2030, reduction is targeted 60%. Actually, if you look to the Baltic portfolio, and especially Latvia, We already have reached those targets. Then the question is, should we lay back in the sofa and don't do anything? Or still we can't do better? To do a little better is very, very hard when you have also done the most to be more efficient. And Latvia certainly has a privilege with the green electricity at hand because of hydroelectric power stations. So it's much probably sort of easier to get these cheap and simple solutions for improvements, and pretty hard to get a step further, but we're trying. Here will be the slide, will be the presentation shared, and you can look at what means this 2050 roadmap for the Norway, but then still we are acting in the Baltic market and we are adapting it for the local needs. We have developed also sustainability strategy for Linstow Baltic. Linstow Baltic is the company which embraces all the daughter companies acting on behalf of Linstow AS here in the Baltics. Currently Linstow Baltic then is covering also, for example, Mr. Shopping Center in Tallinn, and then some 9 companies here in Riga, starting from totally greenfield company with an open meadow in Saliena in between Riga and Jurmala, and then like a urban project developed already. You can't get more dense than Origo and the railway station here in the city center of Riga. So these goals, what you see here, need to be adjusted depending on the company and the specific on the project. You can't set the same goal or a threshold for a greenfield where nothing yet is built, and which is already fully built, and you the only next step is like to do only some refurbishments, some minor improvements, but nothing more. But then we have those 5 targets, not targets, but directions under which we have structured all our goals. So it's a carbon neutrality, sustainable assets, circularity, team and governance, and corporate social responsibility. Regarding ESG, you can easily see that these 3 would cover the E mostly, so the carbon, assets themselves, circularity, and social would go mostly for the 5th, and the governance would go for the 4th. And some of those goals we have marked with the red border around. Those mean that those are already also set on the very top level at our owners' portfolio. So first of all, CO2 emissions reduced. At which rate? Then that depends on each and every company and the object, as I explained before. Another one is a BREEAM certificate in place at level excellent. And here we also need to look, are we constructing a new building? Then it applies for a new construction scheme, or it's already developed and the only thing what you can do is to do BREEAM in use. And then there are some combinations, like if you do a major extension and still you can go for the BREEAM new construction, so that you can evaluate using the appropriate assessors. I am a BREEAM advisory professional, but I'm not an assessor, since you cannot audit your own projects. So just can have more knowledge in cooperation with the assessors. And the third company level goal is support provided for those in need. So I would not call it as the greenwashing, but certainly, of course, we are trying to share something from our profits for the wider benefit of the society. Whether it is like Ronald McDonald Fund helping kids medical assistance on the countryside, or it is planting forest in Estonia. So all the different initiatives. And so these are the key goals. And then we are adding also numerical values to those. Briefly then to the BREEAM, here are the key definitions, what it means. But so it's mostly towards the buildings themselves as an asset, plus for the BREEAM in use, it's also for the operations. So it's also controlled how you make the project, how you structure it, why you take those decisions, not the other decisions, and you need to give the proof for everything of that. Targeted level excellent, here you can see the grades. So the pass would be over 30% of the compliance, and good 45, very good 55. Which is actually very, very good indeed, but probably doesn't look fun on a number. Excellent is more than 70, and outstanding is more than 85. There are very few outstanding buildings in the Baltics. The first one actually was SEB Bank building in Vilnius. And in Latvia, we still don't have one outstanding building, but we were the first ones who got the outstanding level for design stage. And then we are continuing also for the SEB Bank head office here in Riga, which is under construction currently. What are the practical goals? So the compliance of the building sustainability requirements, reduced common cost levels, so the all utility levels for the our users, clients, and ourselves as well, high efficiency, and certainly better comfort and well-being conditions for all users. First of all, employees, and then the visitors are coming. About categories, it's interesting that we know, there are 9 categories for the BREEAM plus innovation category, which is not necessarily innovation as per its definition, but it's more like you do an extra mile to do something better, and then you get those credits as per the formulas defined in the BREEAM manuals. But here we have to be pretty careful, since some of the categories and the percentages might vary even in between Latvia and Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania. For example, in energy, knowing that in Latvia, renewable energy is much, it's not, I wouldn't say cheaper, but it's easier to get it so far because of hydroelectric power stations. The percentage level is lower in Latvia than in Lithuania and Estonia. So you can concentrate on energy and get more valuable points in Estonia and Lithuania. And then there are some things like you see transport only 6%. Why so? But it's the thing that you as a developer can't influence it that much. There's something about location, what you can get out of how many public transport routes, the frequency of public transport, the nearness of amenities, and so on. And then some proof on what I'm talking. So first of all, the first BREEAM certification for the retail institution in the Baltics. That was Ulemiste Shopping Center, reaching level good. Remember, I was talking about a goal excellent. Before it was very good, and we failed. Yeah, but we tried, and still that was the way highest level in the Baltics. So we tried. It was very hard cooperation with contractor, even with designers, engineers, who told like, why do we need to change our way how we worked? It was very hard, and it felt like only we as developers want to reach the level. And the final certificate of the BREEAM in Ulemiste was received more than 1.5 years after the commissioning. That's way too long. Now the normal level, I would say, is like a half a year after, or up to a year, not longer than that. Yeah, and then the BREEAM in use certification now we are doing. So there's already for several years in operation after the last expansion, and we managed to get the level very good. It means that the next things which we have done for improvement of the Ulemiste Shopping Center have been working, and currently we have level very good, and we will go in a few years also to target level excellence, so still for further improvements. Then about Origo Shopping Center, it might look like, yeah, it's tricky, it's city center, a lot of different people around, not always the most pleasant environment, and so on. But according to all these categories under the BREEAM, you see all these different rows. Those are those different categories for the BREEAM. And we managed to get the highest score ever in the Baltics for the shopping centers, 77.3%, which is slightly above the excellent threshold. So, or more than about 70% is excellent. So it's almost halfway through to the outstanding. Still, this level has not been beaten. And then for the offices, it's even higher number, 79.1. But lately this year, also such office complex like Verde and Elemental have reached almost this percentage. So this is considered already as a normal level, but the new manual for the BREEAM is more strict. So those buildings which are about to be started to design and certified by the BREEAM will face bigger challenges than the previous buildings. And in a new scheme, I would say level very good would be about the same like excellent for the 2016 scheme. Just some examples, like in this very central object, that's an early spring. That's why you don't see that much greenery, but there is a green roof elements all over the project. You can see here the green terraces all over within those terraces. Also here, There is rainwater management that only part of the rainwater passes through and goes to the city systems and so on. Also from the landscaping perspective, a lot of improvements were done, but mostly you get the credits for different things regarding engineering networks and the envelope and so on. So more information is possible to find on the Origo webpage as such. Car sharing platform is one of the things which is like, does it really work? Yeah, there are technical challenges that the GPS signal doesn't work in the basement so well yet, and so this still needs to be fixed. But there are priority parking places meant for those who are coming to the office or to shop with 2 or more persons in the car, not only like priority for the handicapped people. And then currently, this is last year project. We also put the solar panels. The solar panels is a tricky thing. For the BREEAM, it only counts if you generate the renewable energy on the spot. So even if your company has a solar plant or a wind farm somewhere else, it doesn't count for the BREEAM. It's just, okay, good, you get the green energy. But for the BREEAM, you need to do it on a spot, and that will cost a lot. Like it's like maximum what we could squeeze out from the Origo and our other requirements, how to structure it from the historical heritage protection board and so on. But there is room to grow, but this is also a costly thing. And then for the Satakos Business Center, the upcoming head office for the SEB Bank in Latvia, this is a picture of today, how we reached already, and this is how it hopefully should look like in June or July next year. And there we are going for level outstanding, and for design we already got the level outstanding with enormously high number. I hope we will get the same or close to that after completion of the project. So the additional qualities for the BREEAM, I already mentioned some of those. It's certainly more structured project management process. It's easier to track through everything. More holistic approach, certainly for different things, and that's what we heard also in the previous presentation, how it should be organized. And something a little bit funny in the Latvian language, you see this sustainable urban drainage systems. That's also where we are paying a lot of attention, especially for the zones where there are very high underground water levels. And the final slide, this is just to give information about the cost part. There are always concerns, how much would it cost? And as per our experience, I put only 3 projects with this new construction certification scheme. What is the total development budget of those projects? The hard costs, so excluding all the management and also Sorainen advisory costs and so on. So this is the hard costs only. And what were the BREEAM costs? You can see these percentages from the totals. And so roughly we can say that it is something around 1%. We can hear the British advisor saying like, yeah, it could be 1.5%, maybe. If the project will be smaller, it could go up. But I would say for new construction scheme, minimum price for a new building would be like around 200,000, just because of a lot of additional studies you need to do and additional work to make the proofs by the architects as well. On top of this also comes something for the general contractor, which is not so easy to count, but this is direct addition to the developer. And then BREEAM in use is like 10 to 20,000, depending on the size and the scope, certainly what you are certifying. But then you need to do recertification. And I would say from experience that the value of the new construction certificate is higher than for the BREEAM in use, but still BREEAM in use you can do when it's already done. But a good thing in Riga, I don't know what's in Vilnius, but in Riga, finally, from this year, it's possible to get a real estate tax reduction for the building for 10-year duration if the threshold is 55% or higher. So it means like BREEAM very good or LEED silver, LEED gold, about those levels. So you get the tax discount. So there is also a additional incentive from the city side. So that's very briefly, and I think then we are closely approaching already the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andis. It was really very practical, very insightful. I really liked, your observation that there can be no, one goal set to fit all projects. It depends, on the type of the project, what goals have to be set. And now coming to our Q&A and so-called panel discussion session, I can see that we unfortunately have no questions in our Q&A chat. I assume that our dear, attendees are jogging or walking while listening to us. That is good, very nice and sustainable practice. But we have some questions that came before the live event started. And first question I would like to address to Simonas. Simonas, you mentioned a little bit about the possible exemptions from the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive for heritage, for city center buildings, historic buildings. So could you please elaborate a little bit? Do I understand correctly that we don't know yet what will be, the procedure in each specific state for qualifying and obtaining this exemption?
Thank you, Vitalija, for the question. Yes, you're actually correct. The Directive Energy Performance of Buildings Directive provides a specific list of buildings which could be exempted from the requirements of renovation, and the member state will have a right to choose which buildings to exempt from these requirements. So it actually will depend a lot on the member state and the transposition of the directive into the national legal system.
And if I may, please stay, Simonas, a little bit longer. So what's the transposition timeline? Please remind to our audience.
So the directive should be transposed within 24 months after coming into force. And it's coming into force after 20 days after publishing of in the official journal. And last time I checked, it wasn't published, but I think it's nearly to be published.
Thank you so much. Okay, now I have a couple of questions to Andis. One came earlier, and I can see another question in the chat. So first question, maybe Andis, you could elaborate. Is there any guidance? What kind of reporting will the tenants of office buildings expect from the landlord to meet their ESG requirements? Let us say in 1 year, in 5 years.
Excellent question, actually. And though I can answer it from the perspective of the BREEAM currently, since for the ESG routines, we have not yet established reporting, and company as a Linstow Baltic, we are not compliant, or we are not required to make the ESG reports, but officially by legislation. But our owners want that we start to do it probably from the next year. But if doing BREEAM certification, then it's possible to do the BREEAM certification just for the envelope or shell and core. So it means for the building as such and for the public areas. That's the standard if you are doing a building on speculative terms. But even if doing on speculative terms, we are trying to prepare a document with the help of our advisors, so-called green lease document, which we ask our potential tenants to get introduced with and to sign together with the lease agreement. If it goes like for the build to suit, then it is this BREEAM full fit out, and it requires also certification of the tenant premises full fit out. So that's already embedded. If not, then it is so-called green lease. And what does it mean? It sets requirements how is allowed, how tenant premises can be built. It's not like tenant can come in and say and do whatever, irrespective that the shell and core would have this BREEAM certificate. It means that also tenant is obliged to comply to the energy requirements about sub-metering, installation of sub-metering things, about installation of compliant water equipment, both for the toilet flushes and also the shower flow should be limited according to the BREEAM requirements. Sometimes it is at the a point of the comfort. Is it still okay or not, and so on and so on. But with appropriate methods, it is possible to do. Then about what materials are being used, that they cannot use whatever paint or whatever wood. Everything should be certified. About the paints also, it may not have those harmful ingredients and so on. So this is worked into the lease agreement. It's pretty simple thing, I would say. And in most cases, actually, the landlord is actually fitting out the premises for the tenants. So what is in then for the tenants? Mainly reporting on the meters, which is a standard more or less. And if going for the further upgrade, further development or changing of equipment, then they need to comply and buy highest energy class equipment. This is like predefined depending on the like computers or TVs and so on. So that's a separate document, and this is what normally would the landlord then communicate with a tenant at the very early stage. And what else to say? Actually, it's even opposite. The tenant is coming to us and asking for this higher sustainability certificate. So we haven't had any really conflicts or disputes with tenants with compliance.
Well, thanks a lot. This leads us nicely to the question from the audience, also, Andis, to you. Does Linstow see an improvement in tenant retention rate in buildings in regards of BREEAM level achieved, or comparing with buildings without BREEAM?
Yeah, well, this is as per the theory which we were when we started it all. There was a very interesting advisor, Hadley Barrett from the UK, who resided in Estonia and brought it all over here into the Baltics. There are Lithuanian, there were other experts working, and there was this average statistic showing that what will be highest, how high will be the building's value, for example. We couldn't prove it, we just should believe in it. Now we finally have a statistics, and our evaluators are evaluating this factor in. Regarding the tenants, certainly it is easier to attract the foreign tenants who have acted in other markets where the buildings are certified as per sustainability standards. For local tenants, still not the first question what they ask. It's still the price and the convenience for some things, but not the certificate. It's mostly for like corporate or wider companies which are acting in several markets, the international companies, then yes, it clearly helps. For local companies, it's more like a marketing trick, but I wouldn't say it helps a lot. For offices more, for residential segment, as I've learned so far, it doesn't help at all. There's no interest in that, in the certification. And for the retail segment, some brands, yes, like H&M, they were very interested in that, while the traditional local brands, not very much into that, and then developers need to work. But office segment, yes. We know, as we call the Big Four and other legal company advisors. Yeah, you're asking for compliance to sustainability standards.
Thanks a lot, Andis. And now, you mentioned very, practically and very openly and fairly that sustainable construction, sustainable development, so to say, needs, certain additional effort. And I understand that one part of that effort is proper documentation of your, sustainability efforts and sustainability agenda. And I would like, pass the torch to Nora and ask from another angle. I understand that in the Green Finance Institute, you also, communicate a lot with the financing side of the sustainable construction. Is it important? How important to document the sustainability efforts properly? Is there any common standard that the developer would know that it would fit for each and every financier? What are your views?
So thank you for the great question. So actually the finance side cares about the green side a lot. because the finance sector was the first one that was faced with the European disclosure requirements about the greenness of portfolio, green asset ratio, and things like that. So the reality is that whatever project they finance, they need to assess the suitability of the project to the EU taxonomy. So EU taxonomy basically tells you what is green and what is not green. We are still struggling with activities in between. So transition financing is a problem, but they are very clear on assessing and saying, right, okay, so does it contribute significantly to one of the environmental objectives? For example, does this refurbishment project, does it reduce primary energy demand? Okay, if we're doing that, then we only need to check on do no significant harm principle. So if the process of refurbishment does not harm any other 6 climate objectives, and if it does not do any bad social stuff, normally called minimum safeguard requirements. So if human rights are protected, if there's no child labor involved, and so on. If we cannot show the clear need, so mainly new construction, right? We would struggle to show the contribution to environmental goals. Then we go down a notch. So we say, okay, this activity is not green. We cannot call it green. It's not taxonomy aligned, but maybe at least it does not do significant harm. So for that, the carbon footprint calculation becomes extremely important. And that's where all this life cycle assessment of any construction activity comes in play. And what we hear is that the financiers really ask for any new projects, what will be the life cycle emissions of this building? How is it going to affect the environment? And certification in a sense would help, but there is no certificate that is recognized for green assets. The only thing that is really the textbook for any financing institution is the EU taxonomy. So, but the data that the certificates provide, so for what we heard from Anders, for BREEAM, how much data they have to collect to apply for the certification. This is the huge asset for whoever is going through that, because the financing side will ask for that data, regardless if you are going through certification process or not. They will ask what will be, how good are you connected to public transport, how much green roofs are you going to have, what is the embedded emissions of this building, what are operating emissions of this building, and so on. And all of that actually is also required for be it BREEAM, be it any other environmental certification of a building. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Nora. And we have a question from 2 parts in our chat. And actually one part is also perhaps addressed to you, Nora. I understand that our audience from Latvia and from Estonia is asking, well, Invega and Green Finance Institute is doing great things in Lithuania. Which institution is it in Latvia and which in Estonia? Are you aware? Do you cooperate with Estonian and Latvian institutions?
So we do in terms of the financing. So both Latvia and Estonia have Invega equivalent in terms of channeling finance and credits and so on. They do not have a Green Finance Institute equivalent. So we are the first in the Baltics, such as center of competence. But what we at the Green Finance Institute, what we are tasked with is to coordinate the activities in the region as well. So what we're trying to do is also set up a network of everybody who's working in financing green activities, renovations, and so on, to share expertise, especially in the public-private partnership domain, because we know on the EU and on the national level that public money will not be sufficient in greening buildings. So especially for creating new financing opportunities, green securitization, and so on, we are trying to build a network. But unfortunately, our Latvian and Estonian friends are a step behind, and they do not have a dedicated institute or institution to deal with all matters green. There's of course departments in the ministries of finance, ministries of environment, of course, and all these national development banks, as we like to call them. They're not banks, but they're these like Invega equivalent institutions. They have experts, but they do not have as concentrated as we have in Lithuania. Hopefully the Green Finance Institutes will appear. But at the moment, what we can do also, we can help Latvian and Estonian listeners. If you really struggle with methodology and you don't know who's the institution in your country, feel free to write to us and we'll do our best tracking through our contacts in the region, whom we can refer your questions to and who would be competent to address them. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, Nora. I really can't wait to see, and I strongly believe that we will see in a short-term horizon Pan-Baltic securitization, green securitization portfolio. That would be really amazing and I believe attractive for any foreign investor pool. Now we have time for last question, I believe, and I would like Elina to comment. Our audience is asking what is the progress in each of the Baltic countries for the adoption of CPR at the national level? Are you aware? Could you please comment on this?
Yeah, sure. So the CPR update that we have been talking today is a regulation, meaning that it has not to be transposed to the national law. So it is different from the directive, for example, that Simonas talked about. So it will be directly applicable when it will be in force. As of now, the new CPR is not in force. The Parliament adopted it in their first reading, and now the regulation awaits the Council's approval as well. So we're not talking about something that is in force, so or could be adopted or somehow transposed into the national level. Yes, the new regulation leaves some discretion in particular topics, for example, in the circular topics, and whether or not how to organize it, the circular economy of the construction products that have been already used. But as of now, at least in Estonia, there are no initiatives, I believe, because we are waiting until the final adoption of CPR, and my colleagues can comment, but I'm pretty sure that there is nothing in Latvia and Lithuania on this point as well.
So thank you very much, Elina. I understand, and it's good to hear that we will have, common standard for construction products once the regulation is adopted. Similar standard, almost should be similar standard in all 3 countries. With that, I would like to thank to all our attendees. I strongly hope that it was useful, that you found the topics interesting. Also, thank you to all the speakers. We at Sorainen are happy to assist you on any questions that you face in your greening the construction or any other projects. So is happy the Green Finance Institute, as we heard. We heard very practical and good examples from Linstow. Thanks a lot, and wishing you a nice and smooth ESG journey. Thank you.